Through the ups and downs, we stand tall in this journey of growth, day by day. Through the ups and downs,
Good morning.
we stand tall.
Good morning. Did we say good morning? I always think that when we say this because people could be listening to this at any time of the day. Good day.
Yeah, but we're saying good morning to each other. I think that's okay.
True.
Should we say, because this is really a backstage pass to our conversations.
It's true. I like that.
Yeah.
Nicely worded.
Just came.
Backstage pass. I've never had a backstage pass.
No, I've never had a backstage pass either, but we did see Neo, didn't we? Once. Kind of within touch.
Oh, that was a good night. Yeah. Anyway, what are we talking about today?
I was just going to say the person who invited us to that was my DJ friend Leslie, who goes by the name Mr. L, and I haven't spoken to him. I did his hypnobirthing for him and his wife a number of years ago now, like kind of around COVID time, I think.
And, I didn't know that.
And I was scrolling through that's the last time I spoke to him. I was scrolling through my junk mailbox the other day, and I saw this message from Mr. L, and I just read the L and thought, oh, it's Leslie, and the title was "Sorry, it's been a while" or something, or "It's been 8 years" or something like that. And I thought, oh, Leslie's got in contact. And when I looked at the email, it wasn't. There's a Mr. L, the Doctor of Limerence.
Oh. You learn something new every day, don't you?
Yeah, it was quite an interesting email. Well, maybe it's
what about Leslie?
Maybe it's another one of those social constructs. Well, it wasn't Leslie.
No, but what about him? Where's he disappeared to?
I just imagine he's still out there hanging out with Neo.
Wow. Good on him.
Anyway.
In other news.
Yeah.
What did we want to talk about today? Rumination.
Tell me about that.
Well, why do some people get stuck, namely me sometimes, in sort of, I suppose, negative thought loops, and other people don't? And you find it very I've had to work a hell of a lot on my rumination, I suppose, and thought patterns from historically speaking, but you don't find it that difficult, I think was the conversation that we'd had briefly offline, wasn't it?
Sometimes I wonder, though, whether it's not that I don't find it difficult, it's whether I don't even realise I'm doing it. Like I'm not emotionally mature enough to realise that I'm doing it.
What would you consider to be rumination for you then?
Well, I don't know. I think it's better if you explain for you, because you acknowledge that you do it or have done it in the past, and it's a thing for you.
Yeah, I actively have to stop myself. That's what. Yeah. So I suppose for me, it's not all of the time, but it's negative thoughts from things that historically have either happened to me or I have done, say. Like mistakes, like things that I don't want to remember, that interrupts everyday life.
Can you give an example that you're maybe happy to share?
So say ways that I suppose one of the main things, and this came through having therapy, was the ways that I'd been treated, that I'd blamed myself for, perhaps when I was younger. And I understand this now to be your mind trying to make sense of things and perhaps resolve problems. But obviously, if they're things that have happened in the past, you can't necessarily resolve them. So for an example would be getting grounded for my diary being read when I was probably about 15. And I've got an anger for that. So that will come in and I will remember it.
But you were grounded,
it makes me angry.
Because of something you wrote in your diary?
Yeah, so my diary, I used to have a lock-up diary.
Yeah.
And I was probably, I think my brother bought it for me for Christmas when I was maybe 14, 15, something like that. And I'd write stuff in it, but never the real truth. I'd write sort of things in there in code, because I kind of had an inkling that it was, somebody was going to read it perhaps. And then I'd hide it. But my mum would never give me any privacy and would go through my things, and she read it and then showed it to my dad. Bear in mind that there wasn't hardly anything in there that you would be able to decipher. Maybe it was like about kissing boys, something like that. It was literally that tame, because there was nothing else really in there. And yeah, and then she showed it to my dad, and then I got grounded for like the whole school holidays or something. Maybe it wasn't as, probably, you know, what we said about our minds remembering things. Maybe it wasn't as dramatic as the whole school holidays, but it was a long time. And then, but I blame myself, like, oh yeah, I probably shouldn't have written things in the diary. But realistically, they should not have been going through my private stuff,
Yeah.
and I didn't deserve it, kind of thing. So so I'd say that is an example. So I
So a
don't
long
mind
time
sharing.
you kind of stepped into the shame that was.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, and I kind of sort of would be. I was very angry about it for quite a long time, but it was like, well, you know, they're your parents; they're allowed to do that. Well, no, actually, they're not.
Mm.
And that would be something that sort of would come up, and yeah, and it was something that used to come up quite a lot. Not so much now, but that's just an example.
And would your ruminations be? Were they? Did you ruminate once you'd got past like once you'd realised that it wasn't you at fault, or ruminate before? Was your ruminations still self-blame, or was it
I think
anger?
no, the rumination was more you want an apology for their behaviour, and
Mm.
they shouldn't have behaved like that, and that was the kind of like, and you're never going to get, because I did bring it up to her, and it's like, oh, one of those like, oh,
Yeah.
wasn't a thing, and I think that's another thing that when it comes to the rumination is knowing that it's not something, perhaps not something that's ever going to be resolved in the way that you want it to be.
Mm. And so this is all stuff from childhood. Is there stuff? Do you ruminate on stuff that's not from childhood?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So there's a lot of that comes up. Not a lot. I would say it's not as much now, but like mistakes I've made and things like that. Like I suppose this was from the drinking. Like when you sort of drink and you make mistakes and you do things. There was a lot of that from the time where I was like heavily drinking, and things that you've done. You're like, oh, and things that come up from those sort of days as well.
And what does the rumination mean for you? How often are you thinking about these things?
Not a lot now, but there's still things that still come up that I think that I thought I'd resolved, and I have to actively stop the thought. And it's like, what was it I was listening to? And this is a really good way of doing it. Is like when you get up in the morning, just clearing out any negative thoughts that you've got in your head, and putting them to bed to start off with, rather than carrying them throughout the day, and just and actually leaning into them, and perhaps thinking about why they're coming up now. Have you had enough sleep? Have you, what have you, all of the main things that you have control over, and then trying to work out why that thought is coming up now.
Mm.
But it is something that comes up quite a lot. And I don't know if that's to do with things that have happened to me, or things that I've done in my drinking days, maybe before I'd had therapy, before I'd sought any kind of help. I don't know. Whereas, do you not? But then, because I
Mm.
wonder if you're not having, or if you don't have any memories that are as bad as that for things that you've done. Do you know what I mean? Or do
Um,
you? Without trying
no,
to out you.
I, yeah, I think, I think that there's three different things that have come to mind
Yeah.
since you've been talking. Um, the first is, so ruminating on things that are where people have wronged me,
Mm,
or is that the right word? Because, like you say, there are some things that are fairly black and white, like
mm,
no one should have their personal diary read.
mm.
I guess there are situations in which it might become, someone might perceive it as necessary, like if they think that their child is in danger, perhaps.
That would be
Um,
the excuse that they would have used, by the way.
yeah,
It
and I don't,
wasn't true.
that's still pretty like
Yeah.
unclear, isn't it? Whether that's okay, not okay. Like, let's say your
Well,
child is
actually, I did do a course on children's, and there's actually a law on privacy for children.
is there?
Yeah, there is actually a human rights law on privacy,
It's really
and that your right to
complicated.
privacy as a child.
Like I
But
think about it's really complicated because I think about all this, like the county line stuff that's going on
yes, yeah.
now with kids,
Mm.
and kids are so terrified that they wouldn't dare share it with their parents, but it's really important that those kids get help.
Yeah. But then I think that comes down to, and this is something that I'm quite passionate about, is you have the connection with your child so that they, from the start, so that they then there's no question about them ever coming to you because you have that connection with your child.
Yeah, I completely agree. But what about if you've missed? What about if that, like, if you thought it was there, or I don't know that, but that's
Mm.
another. I mean, so I think it was just I'm worried about my phrasing of saying when someone has wronged you. But let's just say you've that you're ruminating about something that involves someone else and it's from childhood. I
Mm.
I can I think that it's not that I don't ruminate. I think boundaries are important. You've put in boundaries,
Mm.
definitely. Um, I don't I don't think it necessarily stops the thoughts, but it can give some kind of sense of control
Yeah.
so that you don't feel like you've given all the power over to that person. Um, the other thing is of more recent things or more like just the negative things, thought stopping, which like taking control of the thoughts, which you have said you're doing by clearing your thoughts out. And I think some people don't know how to do that, do they? But it's
But it still doesn't, it still, I just wonder if, particularly with your line of thinking, and if because sometimes you can really spiral. And I do, sometimes it does go that way. And perhaps it's when I haven't had a lot of sleep. Perhaps it's when I haven't been on top of my diet and things like that, because I do notice the difference in there. But the thoughts then come into your head that maybe I would have had a glass of wine and disassociated, and maybe
but
in
what
that
do you
way.
do now?
Now I just try either, what's it trying to tell me, why is it coming up, and then I just park it, right, like I'll think about you later and get on with doing something else.
Well, that's kind of what I do.
Hmm.
So I don't think it's that I don't have the
But do you
thoughts
ever
coming
deal with
in.
it later? Do you ever what do you do?
um
Because if you park it, like I do have to go back to it, otherwise it comes back up again. What do you do?
I'm trying to think about some situations. So um do I think
Your
about it?
secrets.
Maybe it depends on whether it's something I can control or something I can't control.
Yeah.
So is it an argument I've had with Matt, for example?
Mm.
Then I'll note it in the list of the list of things
In his
to
naughty
talk about
list.
later with a third party. So that's a more recent thing, but that's kind of I take control by putting it there to speak about. If it's something that a mistake I made, perhaps in an old job, or
God,
even
you
with
still think back
clients.
that far?
Yeah, I do.
So you do ruminate.
But some of those things I think I feel shame about, but it's almost like, when you try and hide something from someone else because you feel ashamed of it, it's like I try and hide it from myself because I feel ashamed of it.
Ah.
So I'm like, oh, that's embarrassing. Don't even think about that. It's like
Uh,
cringe as soon as it comes
yeah.
up. It's like, no, shut that back down.
Oh no, no, that wasn't me.
um, but with clients, um, if I make a mistake, I think I try to rectify things in the moment these days.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the healthy way of doing it. And what I try and do now is, like you say with like say with Max or with Pete, if he does it anything, I will literally say to him there and then, "That's really upset me." Like I don't let anything go now, whereas before I'd probably be like,
Yeah.
yeah, in from a relationship sense, I don't let nothing passes me. Much to Pete, but I find it does diffuse things. Whereas years ago with Pete, I'd have been like, "Brr."
Right. You see
So
now you
I don't suffer with that, but I still suffer. That's such a big word to say. But it is yeah, I suppose, do you know what I think a lot of my intrusive thoughts are? The injustice, things
yeah,
of injustice,
and you when you feel out of control.
possibly. Yeah, it's things of injustice that have happened in the past. And I'm like, "Ugh, I must make this right, perhaps.
I think that's probably quite common. I do I feel the same?
So is it just the fact that we've got different thought, that we think in different ways, or am I unhealthy in my way of thinking? Is it
I
something
think
I
it's
need to
similar.
work on more?
No, I think it's similar. I think our thinking is similar.
Oh,
I'll say
okay.
it again, similar. And he said it 3 times.
I didn't hear. I hear what I want to hear. I'll ruminate on that later.
I don't. I'm struggling to see how we're different, or why you think my thinking is different to yours.
I just think you don't necessarily let it ruin things, or you don't necessarily let it get to you as such.
I
Like
mean,
I spiral sometimes if I don't catch things, and then it'll be like, oh my god, and then this, and then this, and then it'll be like, "Arr, oh, I've opened up the negativity side of my brain, and then all the thoughts start coming in.
and where do you end up?
I end up normally taking my dog out for a walk to try and clear my head if it gets that
Yeah.
bad.
So I think that is the same. I think I can spiral, but I would exactly like you do something about it.
Mm. I suppose the problem only comes if you are either, because you get people come to you a lot of the time in therapy is people that have had bad thoughts as such, isn't it? And then maybe haven't dealt with them, and
Mm,
that's why they would come and see you because of a certain thought that keeps playing over and over.
yeah. And I'm yet to find that magic wand that some hypnotherapists think they have, the one that you can kind of wave and it just literally changes someone's
Mm.
brain. I think hypnosis is a great tool. It's great for kind of um, giving you a bit more focus and switching off the external stuff and focusing more on yourself. But I definitely think it's about putting um, like processes in place. I I
Mm.
I'm I really I don't feel like I would be working morally if I were to have a client sit in front of me and I were to do an hour of hypnosis and essentially say you will not have that thought again and send them out the door expecting them to not have that thought again.
Yeah, there's a guy that I listened to. I think it was on the CEO, of course it is. Stopping it, yeah. So it's called Ants, and I can't remember the name of the guy, but I just googled it just now, and it's stopping automatic negative thoughts, and that's what I was saying about where you basically stop them in their tracks, get them out, and clear out your mind, basically.
Yeah, yeah. There are. I like the
That's Dr.
metaphor.
Daniel Amen came up with the term automatic negative thoughts. He said they're cynical, gloomy, and complaining thoughts that just seem to keep coming all by themselves. Yeah. And then yeah, 3 steps to killing them, killing your ants. Become aware of it, challenge it, and then replace it with a more positive, affirming thought.
I'm not too into the replacing it with a positive because I think some
Mm.
people find that
I
really
don't,
hard
yeah,
and
yeah.
inauthentic. I'd rather suggest just something simple. I really like the metaphor that these thoughts are like weeds in the garden,
Mm.
and if you nurture them, they get stronger and there's more of them. If you chop them down, they go. I mean, there is a there is like a little bit of a fault in my metaphor because I don't think you're supposed to just chop them. You're
No,
supposed
you're
to
not. You're
pull them
supposed to
at the
pull them
root.
out. I didn't want
But
to point that out,
I
but
know I do
I'm not a
struggle with it.
gardener. You are. So,
What? I'm not a gardener
don't
in
you
the
do? Well,
slightest.
you have stuff to do with grass and that, don't you?
No,
And
I'm
that.
not. Not me. I'm not green fingered in the slightest, but that only in my mind. That's the metaphor, and so I feel like it's not necessarily about regrowing positive thoughts. So you've got someone with these negative thoughts, they've got all these weeds growing in their mind, the pathways are getting stronger and more powerful, and therefore they're easier to access, and the more readily they're going to come, the more you nurture them, the more you have them. So all they need to do really is stop them, pull them out. They don't
See,
necessarily need to replace them.
yeah, but I like to make sense in my mind. I like to make sense of it and know what, and I suppose resolve it at the time. If you could have resolved things at the time, is if you could have actually had a voice at the time, perhaps if you go back to the diary thing, if I had a voice at the time, I should have been able to say, that's not okay, you shouldn't be reading my personal, but none of that was I was able to say, perhaps. So for me, I like to be able to resolve things in my mind
So
of
that would
what
be
should
then
have happened at the time.
parts therapy. But what I think people can do, rather than replacing it with a negative thought, is just replace it with a thought. So if they're wherever they are, they could label all the blue things they can see, label all the red things they can see. When people are going to sleep, I suggest that they play the alphabet game, like thinking of a
Yeah,
animal or a town or a county or a country or whatever that
yeah,
begins with the first letter of each, you know what I mean.
yeah.
And
Do you
that
have you had a lot of people come to you with sort of negative with that kind of thought process, or do they not present to you in that kind of way?
I don't think they present in that
They
kind
wouldn't
of
come and
way,
say,
but
I've got
they
negative
do.
thoughts, solve
Yeah,
them.
no, they don't do that, but I'm suggesting this technique all the time, so I think there's a lot of people
Yeah, yeah,
living with this, but it must come out at some point.
yeah.
So that's a process, but clearly you do this kind of thing, and I don't know if you're seeking to just not have these thoughts at all.
No, I think it's just the fact that I don't know. I just think that I find how you deal with them, or how you appear to deal with them, is much more healthy than perhaps I do.
No, I don't think so. I may.
I'm glad we cleared that up. Bye.
Also, though, I don't necessarily hear about your negative thoughts. You don't necessarily hear about mine because we don't
Yeah, yeah, this is
don't
true.
phone each other and moan. Philippa gets the brunt of that with me, but I can go on for like an hour moaning about one thing.
But then is that giving it the airtime that it,
Yeah, it's obviously
yeah.
not a good thing. I have heard her say to me before, like, Juliet, you've got to get over this. Literally, those words.
Stop it.
Yeah, like kind of, I'm done with this.
Yeah, yeah.
So no, I
And then,
don't. Go on.
yeah, no. So I was just thinking, is it a point of overthinking then, do you think? Do you think?
What do you think you overthink?
Yeah. Do you think it's like the different ways different brains work, and that I'm overthinking. I know it's a natural thing to do, to have, you can't just, although aren't they developing something? Is it Elon or somebody that's developing something that you could basically erase traumatic thoughts or traumatic events from your brain?
Wow.
I'll be the first one up there to have that.
But isn't
Imagine
that
how
what the
that would
brain
shape
does
your
already?
personality.
I mean, to some extent, that's what the brain does already when it represses stuff, isn't it?
Mm. Well, I don't know what this is, this stuff, but there is something that they're doing where you can erase bad thoughts.
What else would it take?
Yeah, exactly. This is the thing, isn't it? It's a slippery slope, isn't it? There's a new series of Black Mirror. Have you ever watched Black Mirror?
No.
That's really good. It's really good. Takes you down some dark, dark, dark pathways of what could happen in the future with AI and other things like that. It's really good.
Mm.
Yeah.
So where are we going with this? What's we
We're
both,
both normal. We both ruminate, and yeah,
but what are the best? Because some people actually do end up in a black hole. Like you say, they'll have a drink and then another drink and then another drink
yeah.
and another drink, or
But
they'll
then, in a
take
way,
drugs.
I think it was, and I do think about this often, is when I used to drink. it didn't used to bother me because I didn't have to deal with it for all of those years. That's what I used to stop the rumination.
So that's what people do, and
So
I think
now I have to deal with my thoughts. Damn it!
But that's what I found
Yeah,
with addicts in general.
yeah,
Most
You
addicts
use that to
are
get
using it.
to stop your but I didn't realize that until after I stopped drinking, and then I had to deal with what came up. And I think this happens, and I've had this with so I think somebody I was talking to was saying, and this was a friend, not a client, and they basically had been on antidepressants since they were 16 years old, and then decided they wanted to come off them. And they basically couldn't even, they had such bad like social anxiety after stopping taking, like couldn't even get on a train.
Yeah, because
Because
antidepressants
they'd
are
always had
numbers as
that.
well, aren't they?
Yeah. And it was
So,
like, oh, look, you've got all of this, there's people around this, and you're very aware of your surroundings, aren't you? I don't know. I've not been on antidepressants,
so it is important then to deal with if you're having negative thoughts. Like we've both acknowledged that we have negative thoughts, but we also both seem to have processes that can stop us from spiraling into depression or a big state of anxiety most of the time, or using a substance to shut the brain down. But and actually, I say using a substance, but even stuff like people
scrolling on social media.
scrolling on social media, that's um, a really popular way to zone out. Also, like shopping, things like that are kind of addictive behaviors that help you zone out. So I think there's probably a lot of people walking around who don't think that their problem is that, or who are using things that are considered normal and acceptable and not a problem to zone out. But I guess the first step, if you're at that point, is some kind of therapy, right?
Yeah, and if it's affecting your, like, because the opposite side of, if people that perhaps don't realise that they're using things like you said to not have these thoughts, is if it's not affecting, or if it's negatively affecting their life, like obviously addiction does.
Yeah.
But if you don't realise that it's negatively affecting your life, then you
Exactly
can't.
what I was about to say. Because I had, as you
Because
know,
I didn't. It wasn't until you take a long, hard look at yourself that you realise what you're doing isn't healthy.
and yesterday we talked about this. We say this. I was in a bit of a negative spin on yesterday or the day before. What day are we even on today? Wednesday. So Monday, I've got a really empty week compared to normal. And so Monday I had this kind of day where I could get on with admin work as opposed to being like in and out of clients. And I had a bit of a blank. I find that I need time pressure to be able to do anything. But I kept ending up on social media, and I don't have it on my phone, but I was on the computer and I just kept ending up back there, and I was going down all kinds of black holes and ended up feeling so rubbish about myself and so much self blame and lack of
What
achievement.
kind of
And
things were you watching? Out of interest, if you don't mind sharing.
um, I wasn't really watching things. It was more um, ending up on the pages of people who are, I want to say, seemingly more successful, but more successful on social media isn't necessarily, but who have perhaps done similar things to me. I think the way I was feeling was that if I have put 100% effort into the one thing that I do that is the same as what they do, I could have achieved the same as them. But instead, I've got multiple things that I'm putting effort into. Like
So
there
do you
was,
think that? But do you think that then at that point, do you think that's a like making, rather than you're using it to get rid of negative, it's then making, that's giving you the negative stuff because you
exactly
don't
that.
normally do that. Yeah.
Exactly that, and that, I think that's going back to your point of when you don't think something's a problem. So I think
Mm.
sometimes people scroll, for example, to shut off or sometimes, I wasn't scrolling shut off. I was scrolling
No,
because
that's
I
what I
was
mean. You were
bored.
using
But
it from the opposite way, and it's then made you go down, you know.
yeah, but I bet there's some people who use it to try and shut off ruminating and end up
Mm.
getting
Then
distressed
end
at
up in that.
something
Yeah,
else.
yeah.
Yeah, because it's very
So is there,
easy.
because as I know you're not a fully sold member of social media, are you? Whereas I probably use it a bit more. But do you do you think that it's that social media then is doesn't necessarily help at all? Or do you think there are some good? Because like I said, working with sort of teenagers, they're not going to stop if they're using, and I know your girls don't, but if they are using social media, you're not going to be able to tell a 13-year-old girl that's using TikTok, for example, to stop using TikTok. It's just they're not going to do it. So rather curate your feed type thing. So start watching good things, and then more good things will come up. That kind of thing. But do you think there is a good side to social media that can be helpful when you're with your sort of thoughts, if you want to curate a feed, say, or
I
not, or are you
doubt it.
completely against it?
I I think it's probably good for social connection, if as long as it's not taking away from social connection. For example,
Yeah,
as I use it to advertise some of the events. Oh, you can find events. I use it to advertise
yeah.
events. You can find events on there that you can then go to in person.
Mm,
Um, so I think it's brought people together a little bit more in that way, but it also divides and separates and keeps people away from each other, doesn't it? Because people are more likely to just sit at home scrolling their social media or connecting with people online rather than actually going out and seeing people face to face,
mm.
which is destructive. So maybe it does depend on how you use it. I had a client this week who has decided to get rid of all social media except TikTok. And
Oh, see that one. Yeah, that's why that choice?
well, she said, well, first of all, she said she feels so much better since getting rid of it all. But I
TikTok
asked
would
the
be the first
question,
one for me to ditch.
well, I asked that question, and she said because she's found that the algorithms on TikTok are so, she said good. I don't know what the right word would be, but good that if she's it very quickly picks up what she likes and doesn't like. So she's curated her feed basically. So
Yeah.
now it's very quickly learned what she wants and what she doesn't want, and it's only showing her the stuff that she does want, whereas she found the others were showing her
Ah,
stuff she didn't want. Now I
that's
don't
not
use
my
TikTok.
experience.
I've never even been on there. Yeah, so exactly. So maybe it was something else that was, I don't know, possibly for her it was like seeing people she knows or something like that, where she's
Yeah.
not seeing that
Mm.
on TikTok. I don't know.
Well, it
But
works for her then. Fine. Yeah.
yeah. Uh so yeah, I think maybe it is on dependent on how you use it rather than,
Yeah.
but it
See,
doesn't
my
seem to make
Instagram
people feel
feed now
good.
is curated to be basically horses, and I had a sloth, a baby sloth that could talk yesterday. That was quite nice. I
Yeah,
like that.
see, I like that stuff, but then I think, what a waste of time.
I know. I know.
I don't, I, I don't. Well, I do find myself scrolling sometimes when I'm sat at the computer, but I,
So do you ever? You don't. You're not ever on scrolling on social media because see, I've been toying with the fact that maybe I spend too much time. I definitely know I do spend too much time on there, but I try to use like scheduling tools so that I don't have to necessarily and set systems up for me to
mm,
post my content so that and ways to make that quicker so that I don't have to spend that long on there.
I don't have it on my phone,
Mm.
which is, I mean, they're very clever, these places, because I can't. There's a lot of functions you can't use on the computer.
Oh,
You
is there?
have
See,
to
I
have it
don't.
on your
Yeah.
phone. Like you can't share stories, for example, or share to your story on the
Ah, can you
computer.
not?
Um,
You can on scheduling tools.
yeah, no, you can. You can post a story, but you can't. Like I can't share um one of my posts to my story. I can't, on Instagram when someone tags you in their story and it says,
Yeah.
would you like to share this to your story? I can't do that on the
Oh,
computer.
okay.
So I have it on an iPad, but the iPad sits in the cupboard. I never get it out. So the scrolling only
Naughty
happens when
iPad.
the scrolling only happens when I'm on the computer, but I very quickly find myself typing like Facebook into the address bar without even realizing I'm doing it. Dangerous game.
It is. You've been conditioned.
But yeah, I just feel like watching all this other stuff is a complete and utter waste of time. Like I could get sucked into it, but what's it achieving?
What is it achieving?
You tell me. You're doing
Well, I use it. I suppose I use it to. I use it as marketing, don't I?
No, the scroll. No, of course I
But the
get that. But
scrolling.
the scrolling, the horses and the sloths and the.
Ah, they're nice.
So what scrolling that is achieving what?
And I suppose I can't see horses as much because my dog hates them. So maybe that's my fix of horses on.
You're bringing the real world into a virtual
Yes.
world.
Maybe I'll get a hologram one if Elon sorts that out. Like you can get those Boston Dynamics dogs, can't you? Maybe I can ask for a horse. I could have it in my lounge.
You know, I mean, maybe this is what you're talking
I
about.
think
But
Frank would like that.
when my nan was in the care home, when she had Alzheimer's, and they had these cats, which they could sit on the elderly people's laps, and they were like real cats. They purred and made noises and kind of
Oh,
moved
I've seen
around.
those. Yeah. I watched a documentary on it. Yeah.
You maybe could get a horse one of those.
Yeah, that'd be nice. But then I enjoy the messiness of the horses. So, but anyway, yeah, maybe I need a synthetic. But then, how far are we taking this?
Yeah, and how is this fitting into your negative thoughts?
I don't know. Help. I'll ruminate on this later.
Maybe we've come to the end of our time.
So,
today.
do we think that we need to accept that having negative thoughts is just you're always going to have them?
Yeah,
Do we need to accept that?
I think we need to accept that. I think I wanted to just kind of say, if you are using substances or entering into some kind of destructive behavior, which, as we said, could be shopping, it could be scrolling, it could be sex, it could be gambling, which tends to be a more known addiction. But there's a lot of things that we use to numb ourselves or black out or repress thoughts and feelings, even like you say, antidepressants perhaps. If we're doing any of those things to shut off the feelings, then it may be worth going to a therapist to work through them to get to the point where you no longer have to do that. And then beyond that, there are techniques like you said, going out for a walk, actually giving the thoughts time to sit and process them, but in a more formal
I don't think it's
way.
I don't think it's necessarily always don't have them, just stop it. I think sometimes they're sent to you to resolve in your own way.
Yeah, and then of course, the weeds in the garden and stopping them literally by doing various processes, like some people would say turning it into a positive thought. I personally would say just changing your thought, labeling all the blue things in the room, using that 5 senses. You know that one? Using your senses, 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. It doesn't actually matter what order you do it in, but just that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All of those kind of things, just to stop yourself nurturing the negative pathways.
Amen.
Yaha.
Amen to that. Thanks, Jules.
Thank you.
With friendship as our guide, together we'll grow, 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 grow. Grow together we'll grow, grow, grow.